Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The latest IAEA reports on Iranian nuclear activities and their efforts to hide them from the scrutiny of international inspection includes one item of major concern, however dated the events described may be. It turns out that approximately 22 years ago, Iran's Project Ahmad included 3 nuclear implosion tests. They were recorded and documented in at least one place, namely the Atomic Archive in Tehran. This was raided subsequently by Mossad, with the contents revealed to the world, but naturally copies are kept elsewhere in Iran. No doubt, they are ready for the use should the scientists, engineers, and military experts be authorized by their political superiors to make the dash for missiles and warheads. Just how dangerous is this development? Joining us to dissect this matter include Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence at Mossad, as well as a Senior IDF Intelligence Directorate Officer. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hi.
Also with us is Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, formerly the Head of the Research and Assessment Division at the IDF Intelligence Directorate, as well as the Director General at the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs, currently the President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And we'll stop there, General. Thank you for being with us. Last but not least, our TV7 Editor-at-Large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, the Iranians have tested. They have maintained quite significant and substantive quantities of material available for a breakout in a very limited period of time. And the diplomatic discourse is not necessarily yielding fruit at this point. Give us a broad foundation for today's discussion.
So, Jonathan, I confess that my work on nuclear weapons took place so long ago that I don't recall a lot of the details. But in all seriousness, next month, the world, and especially the United States, but the entire scientific community, will mark the 80th anniversary of the first test of an atomic bomb at Alamogordo, New Mexico. Now it's White Sands. And the device which was tested there was an implosion bomb, a plutonium implosion bomb, which is apparently what the Iranians tested. This is not the uranium which they are enriching and the method that they are working on. And because it is an 80-year-old technology, obviously almost any country in the world can have it. But the fact is, their engineers and scientists are probably so knowledgeable that the fact that they already had this knowledge more than 20 years ago can teach us that should their brains be put to fresh use, they will be able, in a very short course, to do what they have done over the last couple of decades. And that is prepare for the day when the Supreme Leader will give the order, if he hasn't given this order already, even though he denies it, to dash towards the bomb. And therefore, it is not the fact that they have tested this implosion many years ago that is important, but the fact that they are ready at any moment to advance towards the finish line.
As you mentioned, next month will mark 80 years since that test, which was, of course, just recently, I think in 2003, there was the movie Oppenheimer.
Right.
And that movie depicts the process. Of course, it's not completely accurate, but nonetheless, there are a lot of the various events that took place in the run-up towards this nuclear test. One of the individuals that were characterized in this movie, of course, was no other than the teacher of Oppenheimer himself, Dr. Niels Bohr, who was a very capable Danish physicist. And
he was, along with Fermi and others, and John von Neumann and many other famous scientists, he was present at the test.
He was present at the test. However, one of the significant contributions that he had to the political discourse, not the technical aspects thereof, is the implications on international relations derived out of this new type of weapon that, of course, has changed the world as we know it. So, General Sofrin, when we're talking about this specifically, Israel specifically, but the world at large, cannot accept Iran to attain this device that really changes the world as we know it.
It's a matter of where you stand. I don't think that the whole world is thinking like us. Okay? We are concerned, of course, mostly from Iran. This is a major threat on Israel existence. If Iran is going to possess a nuclear device, then it will be what kind of a cold war between us and them, and they will try to deter the other one. On the other hand, I don't think that the whole world is very concerned about that. When I talked a few years ago with Europeans, they said, what are you so concerned about? We lived 50 years under the threat of nuclear, Russian, Soviet nuclear devices, and we lived happy life, regular life. We didn't go into shelters every day. We didn't hide. We were not scared. We were a little bit concerned, but nevertheless, life goes on. Now, for Israel, of course, it's another point of view, and we cannot accept the fact that Iran is going to control or to have a nuclear device, because this is going to change the whole atmosphere in the Middle East, because it will open up an arms race of nuclear devices, not only in Iran, but following Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, other countries will want also to have that capabilities. Not only will Iran alone by its own, and this is going to be a disaster.
Thank you, General Sofrin. General Cooper-Wasser, Iran's nuclear program is not only an Israeli problem, it's also an American problem, a Western problem, and an international problem at that. What should we focus on in order to ratchet up that understanding within the international community?
Well, yes, it's not only an American problem. It's first and foremost Israeli problem, then American problem, but it's not less a problem of the entire global community. And first amongst them are the Europeans who are very concerned. And we see that there is now growing pressure on Iran coming from the Europeans. What the Iranians are most worried about right now is that the Europeans will decide that they are going to snap back the sanctions of the JCPOA, the international sanctions, because of the IAEA report and because of the fact that Iran doesn't cooperate with the Americans and with the IAEA in revealing the secrets. What the IAEA said in this report was that they didn't get the kind of cooperation from Iran that would allow them to understand what exactly happened. Now, that's something that is telling us that the international community gradually comes to its senses. First of all, the report itself. This report could have been published in the last 5 years or so. It was not. It was delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. All the time, the IAEA was trying to have another round of talks with the Iranians, trying to convince them to come clean on what they were hiding at the time, to no avail. Now that finally the IAEA comes with this report, this is something that's critical. And now we'll see what the Europeans are going to do. And we have actually today the meeting of the board of the governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And we shall see what results are going to come out of there. And the Iranians are very upset and very worried that there are going to be all kinds of repercussions to this report, and that their issue is going to be taken to the Security Council. And there can be some sort of process that would eventually come out with harsher sanctions against Iran. They're very worried. Now, one thing that we learn out of all of that is humility, as always. We came out to the world with the message that there is a nuclear project, a military nuclear project in Iran back in 2002. We knew of a crash program, and we knew some details about it. But we knew, eventually we can say today that we knew only very little, because these locations were not known to us too at the time. This was something that was revealed later on, 16 years later. And, so this tells you that even today we don't necessarily know everything about what's going on in the Iranian nuclear project. I mean, we have the American intelligence repeatedly saying that the Iranians are not on the way to have a nuclear weapon. They do not have an active weaponization program. But they should add, according to the information we have, this is the situation. And everything that the Iranians do, the fact that they have accumulated already 408 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, tells you that what do they mean to do with that? So there must be something happening beyond what we know. We have to be very humble and modest in our assessment. Absolutely. That said, by the way, still coming back to what Amir said before, on the one hand, they try to have also a plutogenic path to the bomb, which is not in a very good shape. And but on the other hand, it's not enough that they know how to produce a nuclear device. They have to know how to produce a deliverable nuclear device. And that's a challenge for them. I don't know where they stand on that. We have to have more details about what happened back in 2003 in order to understand where they stand on that.
Indeed. Well, when we do speak about snapback and the implications, if they do break out, these two, of course, go hand in hand. But by October 18th of this year, we're going to have that snapback sunset clause for the snapback mechanism, which would basically mean that the prior resolutions to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of 2015 will be null and void. Now, we're having a long list of various UN Security Council resolutions that were passed since the 90s and onward that really scrutinized Iran to the point where the Security Council came and stated openly and deliberately that Iran is banned from enriching uranium. Now, the Iranians claim under the NPT they do have the right to do so. However, once the snapback happens, they're not going to have the right to do so. But from an international forum perspective, to bring forth the discussion, the meeting at the UN Security Council, you need a country willing to do so. And it seems that right now you have Guyana. It's not going to happen. By the next presidency of the Security Council, you have Pakistan. After that, you have Panama, which is more favorable to the West at this point. But after that, you have Russia, and then it's already too late. So there is a very narrow window of opportunity for that. Is the latest reporting by the IAEA facilitating for the Europeans to make the decision?
Jonathan, let's put aside what is happening at the UN, whether in the Security Council or the General Assembly. Only recently there was an anti-Israeli, pro-Gaza, but actually pro-Hamas, but not being anti-Hamas, resolution put to the Security Council. The US vetoed it, but all the other 14, the other 4 permanent members, plus what is called the E10, the elected 10, the rotating 10, were against Israel. Whatever makeup there is there, if there is an Israeli effort, I wouldn't put too many hopes on it. But because it ties with what Amnon said earlier about the Israeli fear, the legitimate fear of what the Iranians will do should they have the bomb. To my mind, the efforts, both in the Oman secret talks some 13 to 15 years ago, and then the JCPOA, and even now in the Trump round, they start from the second base rather than from the home plate. The first effort should be to delete the Iranian willingness, the announced willingness to destroy Israel. Should they do that? Should they educate their public that there is no longer any national goal there to destroy Israel, then we can talk about their national means, their nuclear efforts for peaceful purposes and all of that. If not, it is futile. They should announce to the world that there is no longer any goal for them to annihilate Israel. Now they may deceive, they may deny, but it is a crucial first step. Only out of there, one can derive the technical negotiation.
So, in other words, you're saying that unless Ayatollah Ali Khamenei renounces his faith in 12er Shiite Islam, which calls for the advancement of al-Mahdi within the context of Jerusalem and Israel, which also brings about the destruction of the state of Israel in that process, there is no hope.
Well, leave aside Islam and the Shia.
But he is the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yes, but I'm talking about a nation, a country, a state party, state member of the United Nations, which is threatening another state member state. And let's put it to them. If they refuse to do it, we will be on better ground.
Right. Well, General Sofrin, when we're talking about the Iranians, you spoke earlier about the Europeans. I agree that there was no urgency in the European context. Maybe the French had more urgency than others, but nonetheless, the British intelligence and others were nonetheless very active in the Iranian theater to extract data and to try and evaluate the various risks attached to this. One of the responses brought forth were through NATO to establish 2 surface and air missile capability bases, to enlarge that to various aspects, both in Poland and in Romania, that when the Russians came out and tried to confront Europe and the United States on those 2 bases, they said, no, this is about Iran, it's not about you. So there is a certain preparatory process, at least for the viability of an Iranian breakout coming out from the European side. Whether or not it's truly that's a different story. But nonetheless, what is the calculus when it comes to Israel drawing in the European actors alongside America and to establish a true coalition against the prospects of having a, excuse me for the harsh language, but a deranged fanatic at the helm of this country attain weapons of this dimension of mass destruction?
When you look at Europe today, Europe is concerned about the Russians more than anything else, not about the Iranians. Okay? They make preparations right now for 2029, 2030 to be able to stand alone without the assistance of the US, without the umbrella of the US, to defend Europe from a Russian attack. Their assessment is that by 2029, the Russians will be able to hit one more or to infiltrate into NATO in Europe, and therefore they are preparing for that. Now, take into consideration that Russia and Iran today are what we call strategic allies. That means that Iran is supplying weapon systems, knowledge, and anything else to Russia, and they accept back. That means that both countries are well connected. And add to that, of course, China and North Korea, because these 4 countries create what we call the new state of evil, or excess of evil. Now, in this point of view, Iran is part of Russia, or Iran is assembly to Russia. And therefore, we have to use that in order to convince the Europeans that Iran is the biggest threat, not only to Israel, but to Europe as well, because they are connected and assisting the Russians to infiltrate into Europe.
Indeed. Well, in that context, and if we draw from what General Sofrin said, General Kupilvasa, the Yemeni file, the obstruction of commercial vessels transiting through the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the adjacent waterways, something that just this weekend we saw the resumption of attacks against commercial vessels by the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, would be much more deliberate under the umbrella of a nuclear Iran. And in that context, the one country that has been impacted financially, even more than the Egyptians, happens to be Germany. Now, my question here, if that's the case, is there no deliberate interest to have a certain sense of urgency to deal with such a reality?
Well, there is, of course, there is. I think that everybody understands that if Iran is allowed to have nuclear weapons, then the entire situation in the world is going to change. Iran looks at itself first and foremost as a regional power that might become a superpower if they have a nuclear weapon. But this is only a step on the way. They want to export the revolution, as they call it, to the entire world, not only to the Middle East. And if they have the capability, they would do that. And we see how fragile the situation is all over the world. Look at what's happening today in Los Angeles. Look at what's happening in many of the capitals of the West. You see how dangerous it is. It doesn't matter. They can use the excuse of Gaza. They can use whatever excuse. It's a war between the fanatics of the Islamic fanaticism and the Western reasonable people. That's what's happening. And in this war, if the Iranians are able to have nuclear weapons, this is going to be a major boost for all this trend. And fortunately, we have to remember what happened in the last year and a half was that we managed Israel almost alone, with the support of the international community, but against its will. We managed to pave the road for putting a lot more pressure on Iran by showing that Iran cannot rely anymore on their proxies the way they did before, by showing that they cannot protect themselves with their air defenses because we caused a lot of damage to their air defense, by hitting some of the targets over there, sensitive targets. We made it clear to everybody, to Iranians, to the Americans, to ourselves, that we have a credible military option. This is the leverage that the Americans are using when they conduct the negotiations with Iran. That's, yes, it's very dangerous if Iran has a nuclear weapon, but fortunately we are in a position where we can still handle this threat. And everything that's happening in the last couple of months tells us not only how dangerous Iran and how critical it is to deal with it, but also how vulnerable Iran is, and why this is an opportunity for an opportunate time to do that. And I think President Trump understands it, and he conducts negotiations from this position of strength. That's very important.
Indeed. Well, in the event that Iran does break out, and it is a viable option, the nuclear proliferation of weapons across the world. I'm talking from Turkey, where you already hear people discussing this issue, Egypt, which, like Turkey, has now a contract with the Russians to build a nuclear reactor. The Turks, of course, concluded that project. Saudi Arabia, which pays for the nuclear arsenal of Pakistan, has its various assurances with the Pakistanis to also go nuclear in the event that something like this happens, irrespective of their latest arrangements with the United States on the matter of nuclear projects. Germany, past year, had a complete discussion for the first time favorably in support of potentially attaining nuclear weapon capabilities in the event that the American umbrella falters. So we're seeing those type of countries, let alone the Pacific, where you have Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and others also discussing this openly. Japan is a different story, of course. They're a lot more sensitive about this issue, but nonetheless, this issue of Iran is a global issue. It's not a local issue or a regional issue at that. We don't have very much time left. I'd like each of you to have roughly 30 to 40 seconds to have a closing statement. Mr. Owen, we'll start with you.
The Israeli operations against Iraq in 1981 and Syria, North Korea, Syria, in 2007 were intended to prevent, to foil. This is something else completely different from denuclearizing a country such as Iran once it has nuclear weapons. But there should be no doubt, the moment they go nuclear, contingency plans are going to be implemented against them.
General Sulfan?
I agree with what Amir said. I think that we cannot afford to have nuclear devices within Iran. It is a disaster for the whole Middle East and, of course, for us. And therefore, everything is on the table. All the
Sure.
options are on the table.
General Kupelwasser?
Well, I think that time is of the essence here. There's a golden opportunity now. It's a very opportune time, and it's very critical that we act fast. And I think this message is also delivered by President Trump, who repeatedly says to the Iranians, look, you don't have a lot of time. You have to decide whether you accept our offer or you are going to expose to something really bad. And everybody can analyze what really bad means.
You know, our assessment.
Well, he characterized it already.
Yeah.
A lot of bombs dropping, right?
Our assessment should be that their assessment is that we are serious and that they would rather convert their threshold state for some benefits. However, we may be wrong, and therefore we shouldn't rely on our assessment, but we should also prepare for the worst.
Well, as the old and ancient Roman wisdom goes, if you want to prevent a war, prepare for one. So naturally...
But look what happened to the Romans. Where are they now?
Well, in Rome.
Still preparing for war.
You're right. This is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Sofri, General Kupelwasser, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights.
Thank you.
I'd like also to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of who partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters. Israel has launched operations
on Vladimir Putin.
helping Iran develop. We have logic, we have rationale, we understand how the system operates.